Admiral. The floor is yours.
My fellow panelists and district participants, what I'm going to talk to you today is about maritime security threats and cooperative frameworks. Now, some of these issues we have discussed, some of these may be what we have spoken yesterday, and we will have. Maybe some may be a little repetitive, but that is necessary to keep the cohesion going. Now, as we discussed and we saw, oceans over centuries have united different cultures and dispersed people around the globe, connected nations of varying in size and economic and military stature. We just heard from the ambassador how two small islands, have so much link to India. But now, over the last 2-3 decades, people have realized that control over the oceans going to play a very crucial role in the geopolitics in the coming years. And oceans also serve as maritime rivalries, but it's also encouraging cooperation between nations. Now, while we have brought this out yesterday, just to tell you that nearly 70% of the earth is covered by sea, 2/3 of the population lives within 100 miles from the coast, and 150 out of 193 member states of UN are coastal state. 80% of the cities of the world and nearly all major trading and financial hubs are located on the coast. Now, development of newer technologies in communications and transportation has also enhanced trade. But yet, shipping remains the cheapest form of transportation of cargo, with the accounts for nearly 80% of the world trade and 70% of the value. There are close to 54,000 to 55,000 ships, estimated at close to between $450 to $500 billion that ply the ocean route, generating 14 to 15 million jobs. And the total trade across the oceans, as per some estimates, is worth about $35,000 billion. Now, we also talked about fish, metals, minerals, energy resources that come in. As far as we are concerned, we are both a continental as well as a maritime nation. We have a territory over 3 million square kilometers and land frontier 15,000. As I mentioned yesterday, while we used to consider till recently our coastline is about 7,500, it is today estimated to be over 11,000 kilometers by the latest surveys that we have done. And I also mentioned yesterday that, while we have 9 coastal states, 4 union territories and close to 1,200 islands, exclusive economic zone is 2.2 million square kilometers. Another 500,000 will get added when the continental shelf data gets finalized and the UN accepts it. International Seabed Authority, which I mentioned, has given 1.5 to us, which we returned 75,000, and we have retained 75,000 for it. We have in Antarctica also exploitation. Now, with all this, what is happening is our own trade, as Prime Minister repeatedly says, is over 90% by volume and 70% by value. And our exports is about close to $300 billion and imports is about $450 billion. Now, we also saw the shift from Euro-Atlantic or Atlantic-Pacific to Indo-Pacific, which again is very important for world trade because around 60% of the world's GDP is in this area, 65% of population and 60% of maritime trade. Now, with all this happening, close to us, the Indian Ocean region itself, if you see, from Mozambique to Malacca Strait. Now, yesterday, one of the speakers mentioned about how different views US has got about Indo-Pacific. Now, Indo-Pacific, as far as US is concerned, is from their coast till our east coast. Whereas we and many others consider Indo-Pacific means right from the African coast all the way to the US coast. So this is something, and Indian Ocean region, we actually see over 1 lakh commercial vessels operating. The numbers are probably more today. And our location gives us very, very strategic importance. So while we talked of now, once we know the maritime domain, what are the security aspects? Well, of course, conflicts between states is what we have been having traditionally. But today that has reduced and the indirect threats have come in And it's what we call as the low intensity maritime operations. It could be broadly looked at under maritime terrorism, drugs and arms trafficking, piracy, human trafficking and smuggling, illegal, unregulated, unreported or IUU fishing, and other threats to economy and environment, including illegal gathering of seismic data. As one of the both Chinese and even US and many other vessels, actually when they fly through some of these areas just outside our EZ, they're actually trying to gather data. So one way what we do is when they're streamed it, once we get to know that today we're able to, we just monitor our ships and they keep patrolling around them. So with the disturbance, they are not able to gather data. Now the other one, while natural disasters have become, and catastrophes can environment and everything else affected, another thing that's happened is today, a lot of merchantmen are in very dubious trade. They are registered under flags of convenience and the way they operate. And the biggest threat today that is emerging is, as I mentioned briefly yesterday with someone, is cyber security. The UN Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, actually in their review, said that new technologies are transforming maritime transport, providing opportunities to improve economic efficiency, optimize logistics, management systems and operation, expand connectivity, including digital connectivity. Now, a lot of advances taking place in advanced analytics, onboard sensors, communication technology, port call optimization, blockchains, big data, and there are a lot of autonomous ships and vehicles that are coming. I also mentioned yesterday that we are now even looking at unmanned underwater vehicles that are coming in. So with all this, what is happening, the ships are also facing a big threat from the, the maritime security threat from the thing. And because either the navigation system can be operated or any of their system are very much potential to cyber attacks. Now, cyber incidents can attack days or weeks. Now, can you imagine those of you familiar with Cochin or Madras harbors, where the entrance channels are quite narrow, even Visakhapatnam is the same. Now, imagine you wreck a ship. As it comes in, you take the control ship and you put it there. And if it blocks the channel, it could take days or weeks for it to be completely cleared. How much of data loss? A couple of years ago, though that was a genuine accident, the Suez Canal was blocked. So for a couple of weeks and months, we had to go all around the Cape of Good Hope. So with all this, there is a big threat that is looming in. And let me add, as far as India is concerned, Pakistan continues to engage terrorist elements and using the maritime field. China, which is now virtually into various corners, including they have a regular base in Djibouti, means they are very much there in Indian Ocean, can threaten us. And so China is also looking for bases in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, UAE, Kenya, Seychelles, Tanzania, and a couple of years ago they came into Maldives. Incidentally, today the PLA Navy has gone large. The number of units, they're actually more than the US Navy. They may not be that technology capable on some of their ships, but the sheer numbers are there. And the Chinese Coast Guard itself has ventured large enough to look after the South China Sea, which means their other ships can come in there. So maritime security is a major area of cooperation between nations. As challenges to maritime security, even unconventional events can understand. And we talked of yesterday, there were detailed talk about the maritime domain awareness, which IMO feels very important. And we have taken the lead here in this area to have an international fusion center at Gurugram. Today, there are 24 international liaison officers from 20 countries, and they are cooperating with 133 partners in 57 countries to exchange maritime security information. Now, with that happening, Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the Shangri-La Dialogue said that destiny of the world will be influenced by developments in Indo-Pacific, and we want to keep an inclusive, democratic, rule-based order. And we have been working with maritime forces of navies and coast guards of various nations, port visits, we are having search and rescue exercises, staff talks, and increasingly, this is one, we are doing coordinated patrols also some area to keep our exclusive economic zone safe. Now, we talked of the Quad yesterday. which took some time going. It started after the tsunami, and then the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe brought it out. There was a hump, then it got revived in 2017. Some call it the Quad 2.0. And today when we are operating, let me tell you here, this is off record. When we first wanted to do the joint exercise as part of the planning team, the biggest objection came from the state of Kerala. The then communist government here said that you are doing this, this is a threat to China. Now we have to look after our national interests. How does it the threat to China or somebody else? We are looking after our national interests. And in any case, all the participants have very clearly said, we want to safeguard sea lanes of communication. So the exercise Malabar, which again mentioned, which started in 92 with just 3 nations. Now today, it's become a very regular and participation of all Quad navies are there. Again, exercise Milan, which Ambassador mentioned yesterday. We started in 95 with navies of Indonesia, Singapore, Sri Lanka and Thailand. Today, the last Milan in 24 saw participation of more than 50 friendly countries across the continents. And now, next month, we are going to have the next Milan. We'll probably see equal or more. And then as the East Asia Summit in 2019, we brought in the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative to manage, conserve and secure maritime domain, in which it's got the main pillars are maritime security, ecology, maritime resources, capacity building, resource sharing, disaster risk reduction and management, science, technology and academic cooperation, trade connectivity and maritime transfer. Now with all this, and then we brought out the Sagar yesterday. Now we are looking at Mahasagar, which the Prime Minister announced from Mauritius. And we are looking at cooperation, all this. So Mahasagar itself is a mutual and holistic advancement for security and growth. And this, more and more, we are going to cooperate with nations. So with this, I think to strengthen this initiative Mahasagar, we need to expand joint deployment with maritime forces engagements across. And we'll take on the question later because some of these we have discussed earlier. Let me say that in the 21st century, there are very few areas of greater importance than maritime domain and more specifically the Indo-Pacific. And the threats, as we discussed, cut across virtually all the channels. And something threat which happens there, 24 hours later, it could be in your waterfront. So unlike land, there are no land borders. And this is where, even the earlier generation practiced it, the ships will just appear and disappear. They used to call that maritime diplomacy, which used to come in, they are giving a threat. So today, as far as we are concerned, we need to look after virtually from the African coast and West Asia, Southeast Asia and beyond. And our strategy should therefore be all maritime activities to safeguard our military, economic, commercial, scientific and political interests. Our maritime forces, navies and coast guard have therefore developed a large role. And as we discussed maritime diplomacy, this is something the maritime forces and the diplomatic Ministry of the External Affairs, we got to work together to ensure that our interests are safeguarded completely. Thank you.